Joseph's adventures were written down by scribes in about 600 BC, over 1,000 years after the story was set. No record exists as to who wrote the tale or where they got their information. So debate has raged for centuries about whether it's pure fiction or a description of a real man's life. According to Alan Lloyd, professor of Egyptology at Swansea University, the truth might lie somewhere in between.
One can see over and over again in other historical traditions that you can have a situation where there is a core of an accurate historical narrative, but a great deal has in fact been bolted on.
So what is the evidence? The story starts in Canaan, modern-day Palestine, Syria and Israel, before the time of Moses, around 1600 to 1700 BC. It's told in the Bible, the Quran and the Torah, and they all say Joseph was one of 12 sons of Jacob, a wealthy nomad. A central thread running through the whole story is the rivalry between the brothers. According to Dr. Lloyd Llewellyn-Jones, a specialist in family life, this sibling rivalry was strong because nomad chiefs in those times had more than one wife.
Each wife wants their son to become the next leader, to be the next chief of the tribe, or the next king in some cases. And this is certainly inherent within the story of Joseph, where we see rivalries set up between the brothers from a very early age. Joseph, we must remember, and then Benjamin after him, is the son of a second wife. The other brothers are all sons of other wives. So there is this rivalry that seems to go on there.
But the object that ignited this rivalry more than anything was the coat given to Joseph by his father, Jacob. It's been portrayed as a garment of great elegance, awash with colour, the stuff of legend. But perhaps it's not so far-fetched. A visit to any Middle or Near Eastern market or bazaar will show that vivid colours have been an important part of this culture for centuries.
You can come to virtually any Middle Eastern town or city and find a workshop like this, where fabrics are being made in exactly the same way as reported in texts or in wall paintings or in other visual media in antiquity. Today, in the modern Muslim or Arab world, there is a great emphasis still on colourful textiles and gift-giving of textiles too.
Yet to the modern imagination trying to picture the ancient world, a life in colour is not what comes to mind.
I think that we tend to envisage the ancient world in monochrome, maybe because of our over-dependence on Greek and Roman statues. I think we have to put that out of our mind and remember that the ancient world, and again the Near East in particular, was a riot of colour.
But most examples of colour in the ancient world only go back to 500 BC. The Joseph story is set 1,000 years earlier. To find evidence of colour dating back to that time, we need to go deep into the Egyptian desert. The remote tombs of Beni Hassan were built in 1800 BC.
Wow.
And according to Barry Gitlin, a professor of ancient history, they give us a unique glimpse into Joseph's era.
We're here in the 12th dynasty tomb of Nuhotep III. Fantastic scene that I've lectured in my classes about for years.
Nuhotep was a high official of the Pharaoh Amenemhat I. Depicted on the wall are various scenes from his life. Some are people he lived and worked with, but there's one scene of a group of travellers with a very different appearance.
there are two main kinds of garb, both of which are striped. And each stripe being a separate color is very interesting. Plus, you see that there are designs within the stripes, which also adds to the differentness, the beauty, the importance of the garment. And as such, both represent the kind of garment that a character like Joseph could have been interpreted by the writers of the Bible as having worn.
Although these are images of multicolored coats in an Egyptian setting, there are signs that these travelers in fact come from Canaan, Joseph's homeland. All art of the period shows Egyptians as clean-shaven, whereas Canaanites are always seen with beards.
You look at these characters coming in, you just look at the beards, at the faces, and this is the common representation of the Semitic Canaanites coming in.
The markets of the modern-day Middle East and the tombs of Egypt suggest that Joseph did have a multicolored coat. But the evidence doesn't explain why his brothers acted the way they did. There must have been something else about that coat that generated such envy. One reason why can be found in the translation of the Hebrew word for coat in the Old Testament.
Now, when we go back to the Hebrew, as recounted in the book of Genesis, we seem to have an indication that the garment is a special garment. The word that's used to describe it is only found once more in the Old Testament, and that's in the first book of Samuel, where it's actually referred to as a long-sleeved garment. And of course, long sleeves make something quite impractical to work in, so it's a sign of status if you can have long sleeves on your garment.
But it wasn't just the long sleeves that marked out status. Great prestige would be attached to the choice of colours in the coat. In the ancient world, colour was a precious commodity.
Well, today we've got a myriad of colours that we can choose from, and they're all basically, since the 19th century, made from chemical dyes, which mean that they're solid, they don't run at all, we don't really, on the whole, lose colour in the wash. But of course, in antiquity, it was a completely different matter, because every kind of dye stuff that we had to come from natural commodities.
Indeed, some colours were harder to achieve than others. Blacks were difficult, as textiles had to be saturated with dye to stop them turning grey. Whites required bleaching, a very complex process. But by far the most expensive dyes were reds and purples, colours worn by the Semite travellers in the tomb paintings.
Red has to come from something like the stamen of the crocus flower, and of course a tiny crocus only gives 3 or 4 stamen, so you need thousands of these things to create a solid colour red. But without any doubt at all, the most important colour that you could find in antiquity was a purple, a deep, what we can call today imperial purple. A good, true purple has to come from harvesting the sea. It's created by picking up tiny shellfish, mollusks, and it takes thousands and thousands of these things, which are dumped into a vat of boiling water, which ingeniously the ancients discovered gives off a rich purple dye when wool or linen is dipped into it.
To be given a coat made of purples and reds would have sent a very clear message to Joseph's brothers. Joseph was Jacob's favourite. It's no surprise then that this drove Joseph's brothers to get rid of him. According to the story, Joseph is sold to travelling merchants